So, guys, girls, we had just one slide left last class period. I didn't quite get everything covered, so we're going to finish up our last presentation. Let's get started with that. As we look at our skin, we have friction ridges, aka fingerprints. And I need to emphasize to you that identical twins do not have the same fingerprints. Your fingerprints are determined by two things, or your friction ridges are determined by two things: your genetics and your development in utero. And even though identical twins have the same genetics, they have different environments in utero. There are different flow rates to amniotic fluid. Maybe one individual is on the anterior of the uterus, one is on the posterior of the uterus, so there's just going to be different forces, and those different forces the child is exposed to in utero influences the development of the fingerprints or the friction ridges. One of the things I really want to emphasize with these flexion lines is that this is where we cut tissues. We cut for surgical incisions parallel to the flexion lines. So we cut, let's see if I can write this. I need a bigger tablet because apparently my phone was too small for me last class period. Let's see here. Is it going to work? That didn't work at all. Okay, I'm just going to set this down. Yeah, that wasn't supposed to happen at all. I'm just going to close the tablet. We'll fix this. Here we go. So when we look at those flexion lines, we make surgical incisions parallel to the flexion lines. And if it's parallel to the flexion line, we have a quicker rate of healing. Surgical incisions that are perpendicular to flexion lines are prone to slow rates of healing. They tend to rip open more frequently. When we look at our bodies, we have freckles and moles. A freckle and mole is a part of our body where we have melanocytes that are overproducing the melanin. Usually it's going to be eumelanin, that true melanin that has the dark brownish, blackish coloring to it. And the difference between a freckle and a mole is really the shape. Freckles are two-dimensional. They aren't raised above the surface. Moles, on the other hand, are three-dimensional, and they will be raised above the surface. As we look at a mole, another name for a mole is a nevi, that's a technical name for a mole. If you go into dermatology, you'll hear that term a lot. Usually, freckles aren't a big deal. Most of us have hundreds of freckles on our bodies, usually by the time we hit 30 or 40. Moles, on the other hand, those three-dimensional ones, are kind of concerning because that implies a lot of abnormal tissue growth. Usually, when we're looking at skin cancers, they are going to arise from a mole. And then finally, we have a birthmark, also known as a hemangioia. And this is the difference between a birthmark and a mole or a freckle is typically going to be the pigmentation. These hemangioias are going to be red in coloration, and they're caused by excess growth of capillaries near the surface. And they can have two-dimensional or three-dimensional growth of these excess capillaries. So sometimes we'll have bright red birthmarks that are two-dimensional. Sometimes we'll have bright red birthmarks that are three-dimensional. I know, for instance, I have a niece who had a three-dimensional birthmark right on her cheek, and that's called the strawberry, apparently. The good thing about these hemangioias, or the three-dimensional birthmarks, is that usually over time, those excess capillaries are going to be diffused into the body's tissues and will go away with time. So, last question on this presentation. Ethnic differences. So we're thinking back to 2 days ago now. Ethnic differences in skin color are caused primarily by differences in, UV radiation, the quantity of hemoglobin carried in the blood, the quantity of melanin produced, the number of melanocytes, or the number of keratinocytes. So you'll probably want to flip back a couple pages in your slides. So, guys, gals, you may remember as I was talking about that, whether you're Caucasian or whether you have really dark skin, we all have about the same number of melanocytes. And the melanocytes are the cells that make the pigment, the melanin in our bodies. The real difference between our ethnic skin colors or our genetics is the preset level of melanocyte stimulating hormone. Individuals that genetically are going to have darker skin will naturally make more of this hormone that stimulates the melanocytes to make more melanin. Whereas individuals that have fairer skin will usually make less of that hormone and make less melanin as a result with their melanocytes. And that is it for the skin and subcutaneous tissues. I need to reset our recording.